Hi, this is Dr. Gregory Sadler. I'm a professor of philosophy and the president and founder of an educational consulting company called Reason.io, where we put philosophy into practice. I've studied and taught philosophy for over 20 years, and I find that many people run into difficulties reading classic philosophical texts. Sometimes it's the way things are said or how the text is structured. But the concepts themselves are not always that complicated, and that's where I come in. To help students and lifelong learners, I've been producing longer lecture videos and posting them to YouTube. Many viewers say they find them useful. What you're currently watching is part of a new series of shorter videos, each of them focused on one core concept from an important philosophical text. I hope you find it useful as well. Book 1, Part 4, Section 6 of David Hume's Treatise of Human Nature is titled Of Personal Identity, and Hume is going to begin in a way that will seem somewhat paradoxical both to ordinary people and to many philosophers, both of his time and of ours, in saying, well, we don't really have a unified self or soul or person, whatever you want to call it, a me, who remains the same over time, who can be understood as something like a substance. And so he's going to talk about this common philosophical view, and he's going to summarize it by saying that they imagine we are every moment intimately conscious of what we call our self. So being intimately conscious of it means that we have the possibility for awareness of the I, the self, the me, at any moment that we want to call it up. And so he's going to say this is what they think. We feel its existence and its continuance in existence, and we are certain beyond the evidence of a demonstration, both of its perfect identity and its simplicity. So it not only is the same thing over time, it remains the same, but it's also simple. It's not made of all sorts of other things. It's not a composite, so to speak. It's like the basic building block, we could say. And he tells us the strongest sensation, the most violent passion, they say, instead of distracting us from this view, only fix it the more intensely and make us consider their influence on self either by their pain or pleasure. And there's one other thing that he says. So you notice he used the word demonstration there. He says, to attempt a further proof or demonstration of this would be to weaken its evidence. No proof can be derived from any fact of which we're so intimately conscious, nor is there anything of which we can be certain if we doubt this. Now, that, of course, is a reference to René Descartes' very famous move in the Meditations on First Philosophy, as well as in his discourse on method, saying, the one thing I can be totally sure of is if I am thinking, or that I do think, I exist. If I doubt, I exist. There's a self. Hume says, well, that's not really the case. Now, I will point out that he is going to make an appeal to his own experience, his own thinking, and he's going to say, I think most human beings are like me. A little bit later in this section, he's going to say, if anybody on serious and unprejudiced reflection thinks that they have a different understanding of himself, I have to confess I can't reason any longer with him. Their idea is too different than my own. I can't even make sense of it. So what is his idea? What's the criticism he's making? So Hume thinks that we have impressions and then we have ideas, and ideas are what we do most of our thinking with. Impressions are much more lively. They're often, the original of things, and then we have our ideas of them, which we can think about later and call up from memory or imagine with or think with, right? So Hume wants to know, where did you get this idea of self from? Where's the impression of that. And he says, from what impression could this idea be derived? This question is impossible to answer without manifest contradiction and absurdity, but it is a question which has to be answered if we want to say that the idea of self is clear and intelligible, even that we understand it. So where is this impression, or whatever we want to call it, of ourself, our original experience? And he says, unfortunately, we don't have one. So the self, we would think of it as like a single impression, if it's simple, that all the others would be referred to. But I look inside myself and I don't find anything like that, do I? He says, the self or person is not any one impression, but that to which our several impressions and ideas are supposed to have a reference. So that's one problem. Another problem that arises, he says, if any impression gives rise to the idea of self, that impression, since the idea of self is supposed to be something that remains the same over time, that impression must continue invariably the same through the whole course of our lives, because that's what the idea of self is, right? And Hume says, do we have any impression like that? No. He says there is no impression constant and invariable. Pain and pleasure, grief and joy, passions and sensations succeed each other and never all exist at the same time. So there's no one single impression that maybe, below the level of consciousness until we pay attention to it, is always there. So we don't have something that we can point to and say, there's where I get my idea of self from. What happens when we actually, as Hume says, enter into myself? Now notice he doesn't have a problem talking about myself, but he's going to have a different conception of what the self actually is. So he says, what happens when I do enter into myself? I stumble upon some particular perception or other, heat or cold, light or shade, love or hatred, pain or pleasure. Actually, we don't just stumble across one. We typically stumble across a whole bunch of them, right? And he says, I can never catch myself at any time without a perception, and I can never observe anything other than the perception. And now perception here includes not just sensory data, but also, like we saw, love or hatred, so affectivity as well, right? So I'm always having some particular impressions, some sensations of things, some passions. And he says, the only time that's not the case is when I'm asleep. Or I suppose when I die, it's going to be like that. He says, when my perceptions are removed for any time, as by sound sleep, I am insensible of myself and may truly be said not to exist. We kind of go out of existence when we're sleeping. And when we die, assuming that there's no sort of afterlife or soul, then we are just annihilated, right? And he says, I can't think of what would be further required to make me a perfect non-entity. And here's where he says, somebody else might have a different idea about this, but I can't understand it. What happens when I do look at myself? I don't find any principle of self in me. And I don't think anybody else is going to either. So what does this lead us to then? So this is a very famous assertion of David Hume. The human mind is going to be what he's going to call nothing but a bundle or collection of different perceptions which succeed each other with an inconceivable rapidity and are in perpetual flux, that is, change and movement. So he gives some examples. Our eyes cannot turn in their sockets without varying our perceptions. We look around, we're seeing different stuff. Our thought is still more variable than our sight. All our other senses and faculties contribute to this change, nor is there any single power of the soul, he's going to say, which remains the same unalterably perhaps for one moment. So he's actually going to give us a kind of metaphor here. He says that the mind can be compared to a theater. Now, we might think of a movie theater. Think about an actual theater where you go and see a play or an opera or something like that. Hume is, assuming an audience that is quite familiar with that sort of thing. So you go to the theater, and what do you see? Well, people doing things and, stage sets and actions and all of that. It's constantly changing, right? So he says that several perceptions make their appearance, pass, repass, glide away, mingle in an infinite variety of postures and situations. There's no simplicity in it, nor identity. No simplicity at one time, nor identity in different times. Whatever propension we may have to imagine that, that's not really the case. And he says we've got to be a little bit careful with the comparison to the theater. When you go to the theater, you know where the ideas are coming from. You see those guys doing that stuff on the stage, right? You see the stage setting and, the curtain come down and all of that stuff. When it comes to our mind, we don't actually know where all of these things are coming from. We might like to think that we do, but we actually don't. He says they are the successive perceptions only that constitute the mind. We don't even have the most distant notion of the place where these scenes are represented or the materials of which it's composed. We don't actually know our own minds, right? All we know is what our minds perceive. So this leads to a good question that he's going to ask. Well, then why the hell do we think we have a self? Why is there this propension to ascribe an identity to these perceptions and suppose ourselves possessed of an invariable, unchanging, and uninterrupted existence through the whole course of our lives? And he says, well, we got to make a distinction here. And he's going to treat one part of this distinction in the rest of this section. He says we need to think of personal identity in two different ways. One is in terms of thought or imagination, and then the other is personal identity in passions or the concern we take in ourselves. So passions would include love, hate, pride, humility, anger, joy, sadness, all those sorts of things. The concern we take in ourselves. We do think of ourselves as having identity over time, but maybe that's just in a practical sense, not in a genuine metaphysical or theoretical sense. And so he says, we make this distinction, and the first of these is our present subject. We're going to have to take the matter, as he says, pretty deep and account for the identity which we attribute to plants and animals, because there's a great analogy between that and the identity that we ascribe to a self or a person. So there will be some way in which we can still talk about ourself, but what we're talking about is, according to Hume, really just a bundle or collection of things that are all thrown together that the mind perceives. The mind never perceives itself directly, but only the fleeting contents that pass through the theater of the mind.